Some things in 5th edition are just poorly designed, and sometimes you have to house rule or interpret the rule to make it useful. We usually stick to rules as written for our videos, but sometimes we go a little outside of that. Last time we did this, we talked about the blade cantrips and how the errata made them less useful, and how we dealt with that in our campaign. We'll put the link up to that here. Today we are talking about what might be among the most useless cantrips in the game, Magic Stone. The idea of it is good. A cantrip that can create a magic weapon is excellent, but it doesn't scale like other cantrips, and they made it a spell attack, so it doesn't interact well with most things that affect weapon attacks, so it's almost never used. Today we're going to work with it to try and make it good without fundamentally changing the spell. We're also building a character that will make use of this cantrip. Hi everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of The Dungeon Crashers. I'm Guy.
And I'm Zapil. Before we get started, remember to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our excellent D&D content. We would also like to give a shout out to Crystal. Thank you for taking care of my brother and for being a loyal viewer. Today we are also continuing our series using material from Big B's Glory of the Giants, and we'll be using the Giant Foundling background again. It gives the skills Intimidation and Survival, and he speaks Giant and one other language of our choice, and he chooses Orcish. And it gives the Strike of the Giant's feat. When choosing this feat, the character chooses the type of giant that raids them, and the ability it gives is different for each type of giant. Today's hero is choosing Stone Giant. Once per turn, when he hits a creature with a melee weapon attack or thrown weapon attack, the target takes an additional 1d6 of force damage and must make a strength saving throw or be pushed away from him by 10 feet. The save is 8 plus his proficiency bonus and either his strength or constitution modifiers. He can use this a number of times per long rest equal to his proficiency modifier. For race, we wanted something that would be more likely to end up in the care of stone giants and something that would provide some interesting abilities, and we decided on Deep Gnome. They live in similar areas as stone giants and share a deep connection to stone. Deep gnomes are small and have a walking speed of 30 feet. They are humanoid and considered a gnome for anything that requires them to be a gnome. They have dark vision out to a range of 120 feet, and gnomish magic resistance, giving them advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws against spells. They also get the gift of Zavernalvim. I have no idea if I said that right, but anyways, we'll continue. At 3rd level, they can cast the Disguise Self, and at 5th level, they can cast the Non-Detection without using material components. They can cast these spells once per long rest without using a spell slot, and they can cast them with any spell slots they have of the correct level. Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma is the casting ability for these spells, and we will be choosing Wisdom. They also get Camouflage. When making a stealth check, they can do so with advantage. They can use this trait a number of times per long rest equal to their proficiency bonus. They speak Common and one language of their choice, and we are taking Gnomish. He never learned to speak it as a child, being too young, but his foster family felt that it was important that he know it, and one of the older giants knew the language and taught it to the young gnome. Deep gnomes get the ability score bonuses common with the newer races, which are 3 plus 1 bonuses that you can put anywhere you want, but no more than 2 on the same ability. Using the point buy system, we put an 8 on Strength, a 13 on Dexterity, making it 14 with 1 bonus point, a 15 on Constitution, making it 16 with the second bonus point. In addition to helping hit points and saves, this will set the DC for his Strike of the Giant's feat. We put a 10 on Intelligence, a 15 on Wisdom, making it 16 with the last bonus point. This is going to be his casting stat, and he will use it for his attacks as well. And lastly, we put a 10 on Charisma.
Our hero started life in a predicament, although he has no memory of it. His parents and most of the rest of his people had been slain by a rampaging purple worm. It had tunneled right through their home, consuming everyone in sight. Our hero, just a babe, was left unnoticed. Shortly afterwards, a pair of ogre scavengers passed through, following the worm's trail to collect anything of value the beast left behind. It's unknown why they took the gnome infant. Perhaps it was uncharacteristic mercy, or maybe they just wanted a snack. But in either case, the child was with them when they went to trade their scavenged goods with the stone giants. The giants immediately noticed the small creature and knew it for what it was, and offered the ogres a few extra coins for it, which the ogres happily agreed to. The giants cared for the young gnome, raising it to adulthood. It spent its childhood wandering the caverns below the earth. At first it stayed close to home where all of the local creatures knew it belonged to the giants and left it be. But as he aged, he wandered farther beyond his adopted family's protection, learning the underground ways and learning to defend himself with what tools he had. His stone giant kin weren't warriors, relying on their strength and size to protect themselves, and when they had to fight they used simple clubs and hurled boulders. And our hero did the same, but he lacked the size and strength of a giant. A young drow warrior who came often to trade with the giants saw the young gnome's plight and gifted him with a dagger and taught him to fashion a sling to hurl his stones with. As he grew older, his dark elf friend taught him to wear armor as well, and through trade acquired a gnome-sized chain shirt to protect the young gnome. Suitably armed and armored, our hero began exploring the Underdark in earnest, sometimes with his drow friend and sometimes on his own. Our hero begins play as a first-level ranger. He gets 3 skills from the ranger list, and he takes perception, investigation, and stealth. He is proficient with light and medium armor, simple and martial weapons, and strength and dexterity saves. We are using Tasha's ranger, so instead of favored enemy, he gets favored foe. When he hits a creature with a weapon attack, he can mark it. Once per turn, when he hits the marked creature, it takes an additional 1d4 damage. This damage increases to 1d6 at 8th level and 1d8 at 14th level. While better than favored enemy, this ability is overall inferior to Hunter's Mark once he gets that next level, but it doesn't require a spell slot and instead can be used a number of times per day equal to its proficiency modifier, which is nice if you need to conserve spell slots or are out of spell slots. He also gets Deft Explorer, which gives different abilities at different levels. The ability he gets here is Canny. He gains expertise in one of his skills and he chooses Stealth, and he learns 2 additional languages. He chooses Undercommon, which is the common language used in the Underdark, and Elvish, which he learned from his Dark Elf friend. His starting equipment is a chain shirt, a dagger, a sling, and a bag of stones, and a club. He doesn't use the club as he lacks strength, but his giant foster family believes it's dangerous to travel without a club and insisted that he take it with him. He also carries an explorer's pack. In our game, we're pretty flexible when people want to do something for flavor, and we would let this character throw rocks as if they were darts that deal bludgeoning damage. But if your DM doesn't like this, he should carry some darts for when he wants to make a thrown weapon attack instead of using his sling. At close range, a dart is just as good as a sling stone and can benefit from his stone giant strike. At 2nd level, he becomes a 2nd level ranger, gaining a fighting style, and he takes Druidic Warrior, which gives him 2 cantrips from the Druid list, and he takes Shillelagh and Magic Stone. Shillelagh will make his club useful, using his wisdom for attack and damage, and dealing 1d8 instead of 1d4. Magic Stone is the tricky one. At this level, it's pretty good as is. As a bonus action, it creates 3 magical stones that count as magical weapons, and can be thrown or shot from a sling, and uses wisdom for the attack roll and deals 1d6 plus his wisdom modifier and damage. Adding the wisdom modifier makes the damage for this as good or better on average than attack roll cantrips. If thrown, the range is 60 feet, and if shot from a sling, it uses the sling's range. The spell doesn't specify what action is used to throw the stone, which is quite an oversight. The obvious choice is the attack action, and Sage Advice has confirmed this, and also said that this should allow it to benefit from extra attack, but rules as written it doesn't. It is also a spell attack, not a weapon attack, so won't benefit from things like archery, or thrown weapon style, sharpshooter, or other benefits that improve attacks. This means that it is going to scale poorly with level. It will still be good after 5th level when he gets extra attack, keeping up with other damage cantrips, but after that it falls behind. This makes it almost useless for druids who don't get extra attack, and only okay for rangers, and rangers have better things to do with their action than casting a cantrip most of the time. So in order to make it acceptable, we are making a small change. The Magic Stone, instead of being a spell attack, it will be a thrown or ranged weapon attack that uses wisdom instead of strength or dexterity for attack and damage. Making an attack gives it a lot more utility. For starters, if thrown, it will work with his Strike of the Giants, and he can use feats and fighting style to enhance it. Our goal with this character is to see how well it works. We think it's going to make the cantrip useful but not overpowered, something that a player will do because it's cool and not because it's super powerful. However, it could end up still being weak or end up being very powerful. This is a spell as we think it should be. While the wording on this version is very different from the original, it functions almost exactly the same, except that using the stone is treated as a weapon attack instead of a spell attack, and the action required to use it is clearly specified. He also gains spellcasting, getting 2 first-level spell slots and learning 2 spells from the ranger list. First, he takes Hunter's Mark. This lasts for 1 hour depending on concentration. As a bonus action, he can cast this to mark a creature, and when he hits a creature with an attack, it deals an additional 1d6 damage. It also gives him advantage on perception and survival checks to find the marked creature. If he kills the creature, he can use a bonus action on a subsequent turn to mark another creature. For his second spell, he learns Hail of Thorns. This uses a bonus action to cast and requires concentration. The next time he hits a target with a ranged attack, the target of the attack and each creature within 5 feet of it must make a dexterity save or take 1d10 piercing damage, or half as much on a successful save. Getting a ranged area of effect is good for a first level spell, but it does require concentration, so use it before casting Hunter's Mark. He can use a druidic focus for his spellcasting, and one of those can be a rod or staff made of special wood, and with your DM's permission he can craft a club that also is his druidic focus. At 3rd level, he becomes a 3rd level ranger, gaining a conclave, and he becomes a Gloomstalker. He gains umbral sight, increasing the range of his dark vision to 150 feet, and when he is in darkness, he is invisible to creatures that rely on dark vision to see him. This is very strong. We have a Gloomstalker in our game, and as DM I find it really frustrating when I have an encounter underground and all the enemies are using dark vision and don't have torches or other light sources. I try not to metagame my players by having enemies do things they wouldn't logically do just to nerf a character's ability, and there really isn't a reason why orcs or dark elves would carry torches. Drow at least can use magic to light up an area, but that negates their own stealth abilities. He also gets Dread Ambusher. He adds his wisdom modifier to his initiative, and on the first turn of combat his movement speed increases by 10 feet until the end of turn, and if he takes the attack action he gets an extra attack, and if that attack hits it deals an additional d8 damage of the weapon's type. Gloomstalkers also get spells known at each spell level that don't count against their number of spells known, and the one at this level is Disguise Self. However, he also gets that from being a Deep Gnome at this level, and can cast it once per day without using a spell slot. As a ranger, he gets another first level spell slot and another first level spell known, and for the spell he takes Goodberry. Not only does this heal more hit points on average than Cure Wounds, it can be divided among multiple creatures, and one berry will also feed an individual for a day, so it pretty much eliminates the need to carry rations provided you can cast it once a day. An interesting thing about this spell is that the berries lose their potency after 24 hours. So if he's going into a long rest and has a spell slot left, he can cast this, and when he wakes up, he will have recovered his spell slots, and the berries will still be potent for 16 hours. He can also cast it multiple times if he has the spell slots, and stockpile a bunch of berries. His time exploring the Underdark has not been wasted. He found hidden treasures, fought monsters that were pests or sometimes even dangerous to his stone giant family, and made the acquaintance of others like himself who explore the hidden ways for fun, profit, or heroism. They call themselves Gloomstalkers, and while they seldom work together, they share information and will join forces in time of need, despite being loners by nature.
At 4th level, he becomes a 4th level ranger, and he gets an ability score improvement or a feat, and he takes the keenness of the stone giant feat. It lets him increase his wisdom to 17, and he gains 2 abilities. The first is Cavernous Sight, which increases his dark vision by another 60 feet to an absolutely ridiculous 210 feet. He also gets Stone Throw, which lets him take a rock and make it magical attack with it. He throws the rock as a bonus action, making a ranged spell attack with a range of 60 feet, using his wisdom modifier for the attack, and it deals 1d10 of force damage, and the target must make a strength save or have a prone condition. This opens up a pretty explosive opening round of combat if he has some prep time. Assuming he has already cast Shillelagh, he can use his bonus action to throw a rock, knocking the target prone. Then run up with his 40-foot movement speed and do 2 attacks, with his club with advantage, because they are prone, and dealing an additional 1d8 with one of the attacks. This is even better if he has Hunter's Mark going as well, but if not, he can use his marking ability on the target and add a 1d4 to one of his hits. At 5th level, he becomes a 5th level ranger, gaining extra attack. Now when he takes the attack action, he can make 2 attacks instead of 1. He gets a 4th first level spell slot and 2 second level spell slots, and can learn another spell of up to 2nd level. And he chooses Spike Growth. This creates a 20-foot radius area of effect spikes that deal 2d4 piercing damage to creatures moving through it for every 5 feet they move. And if the creature didn't see the spell being cast, they need to make a perception check against the spell's DC to notice the area is hazardous. Since he is effectively invisible in darkness, there is a good chance enemies won't see him cast the spell, and since he has expertise in stealth and ridiculously long dark vision range, he is likely to have plenty of setup time to cast this before enemies even know they are going to be attacked. He can set this up, rain magical sling stones at them while they have to wade through the spikes to get to him. From being a deep gnome, he also learns the spell Pass Without a Trace and can cast it once a day without using a spell slot. This makes him even more stealthy and can also make any number of his companions super stealthy as well. From Gloomstalker Conclave, he also learns the spell Rope Trick, which is a useful spell. The duration is long enough to get a short rest for him and his companions, and it also has some uses as a hiding spot or even just a way for his companions to climb up something. At 6th level, he takes his first level of fighter, getting a fighting style, and he takes the archery style, letting him add +2 to his attacks with ranged weapons like his sling. Normally this wouldn't work with magic stone, even though it's dumb that it doesn't, but as we said earlier, we are house ruling a little bit, and our update to the cantrip means it does. He also gets second wind. Once per short rest, he can use his bonus action to heal 1d10 plus his fighter level and hit points. At 7th level, he takes 6th level of Ranger. His favored foe improves to a d6, and from Deft Explorer, he gets Roving. His movement speed increases by 5 feet, and he gains a swimming and climbing speed equal to his walking speed. This is extremely useful underground, and the swimming speed is especially nice because unlike swimming with athletics, this isn't affected by wearing armor. He could be in a half plate and still swim 35 feet a turn. He isn't going to wear half plate, but by this level he has probably been able to upgrade his chain shirt to breastplate. At 8th level, he becomes a 7th level of Ranger. From Gloomstalker, he gets Iron Mind, which gives him proficiency with wisdom saves. He also gets a 3rd, 2nd level spell slot and can learn another spell of up to 2nd level, and he chooses Find Traps. His investigation is okay, but this will be much more reliable means of not being skewered by poison darts or dropped into a pitfall of spears or poison snakes or acid. At 9th level, he becomes an 8th level Ranger, getting another ability score improvement or a feat, and he takes the Observant feat. This increases his wisdom to 18 and lets him read lips and add a +5 to his passive perception and passive investigation, which also helps him avoid falling into pits or stepping on triggers or glyphs that would otherwise ruin his day. From Ranger, he gets Land Stride. Moving through difficult terrain doesn't cost him any extra movement. He can also move through non-magical plants without being slowed or taking damage from thorns or other hazards. It also gives him advantage against magical plants that are conjured to slow movement, such as the Entangled spell.
His exploration has led him farther and farther from home. He has found his way into the mines of the dwarves and even into underground communities of surface gnomes. The latter greeted him with much suspicion, having heard stories about his people that are somewhat unflattering. He doesn't think they are true, but having never lived among his own kind, he doesn't know for sure. The gnomish they spoke was different than what his giant family taught him, but after a while he was able to understand the dialect and convince the rock gnomes that he was friendly enough. He had never ventured this close to the surface before and was curious. His host told him it was less than a day's travel to the surface, and there was a wood elf village close by. A little nervous but overcome with his curiosity, he made his trip to the surface. He had not expected the sun to be so bright. He had heard of it, but the reality was much more fearsome than he had been led to believe. At first it hurt his eyes, and it took him time to get used to all of the light and how far he could see. Feeling it would be foolish to travel exposed by so much light, he waited until night to venture out to find the Elven village. At 10th level, he becomes a 9th level Ranger. He gets 2 3rd level spell slots and can learn another spell that can be up to 3rd level. He takes Conjure Barrage. The damage of the spell is mediocre, but a 60-foot cone is excellent area effect, and it's one of the rare Ranger spells that is both good and lacks concentration. Also, blasting a huge cone of flying rocks really suits his style. From Gloomstalker, he gets the spell Fear as a spell known that doesn't count against the number of spells he can know. At 11th level, he becomes a 10th level Ranger. From Deft Explorer, he gets Tireless. A number of times per day equal to his proficiency modifier, he can use an action to give himself a number of temporary hit points equal to 1d8 plus his wisdom modifier. Also, when he finishes a short rest, he can reduce his level of exhaustion by 1. He also gets Nature's Veil. A number of times per long rest equal to his proficiency modifier, he can use a bonus action to turn himself and all of his equipment invisible until the start of his next turn. This ability is absolutely worth going 11 levels into Ranger for. It doesn't say it ends if you attack, and it doesn't use concentration, meaning from the start of your turn until the start of your next turn, you get all of the goodness of invisibility with none of the drawbacks. At 12th level, he becomes an 11th level Ranger. From Gloomstalker, he gets Stalker's Fury. Once each turn, if he misses with an attack, he can make an additional attack as part of the same action. He also gains a third level spell slot and can learn another spell of up to 3rd level, and he chooses Meld into Stone. He already has Rope Trick to guarantee a short rest, and now he can use Meld into Stone to ensure a safe long rest. This makes traveling alone a pretty safe proposition for him. At 13th level, he becomes a 12th level Ranger and gets another ability score improvement or feat, and he takes the Sharpshooter feat. Attacking at long range doesn't cause him disadvantage. His range attacks ignore half and 3/4 cover, and he can subtract 5 from his attack roll to add plus 10 to the damage of a range attack. Now he will be wanting to use his sling more often. Up until now, unless the target was far away, he wanted to throw his magic stones to be able to add his strike with giants. But Sharpshooter doesn't work with thrown weapons, so he will want to use his sling most of the time. His greeting at the Elven village was less warm than he expected. He had been friends with elves his whole life and found them good company, and his Elvish was excellent. He gave a very polite greeting to the first elves he saw and respectfully asked for welcome. Instead of responding in typical Elvish fashion, they became hostile. Wondering what he had done wrong, he apologized and asked how he had given offense. He suspected it might be a dialect issue, as it was with the gnomes, and he was partially correct. The wood elves understood him just fine, but his accent was that of the drow, and our hero had not known that the dark elves and wood elves are not friendly with one another and are in fact ancient enemies. It took quite a bit of discussion and explanation to convince the wood elves that he wasn't an agent of the drow or up to any mischief, but eventually they became more friendly and offered him hospitality in their treetop home. Trees were another new experience for him, and he thought they were wonderful. Wood was scarce in the Underdark and somewhat precious, but here it just grew out of the ground. He had seen and marveled at trees his entire journey here, but none like the giant oaks the wood elves made their home in. Once the elves accepted that he wasn't an enemy, they warmed up to him, and over the next weeks he became very friendly with some of them. They seemed intrigued by his story of being raised by giants and his tales of the Underdark, which they had never visited. In return, they told him much of what he needed to know about the surface world, and suggested if he wanted to explore further, there was a human city a few weeks' travel to the west. He'd only heard of humans in stories, scary tales of giants told of small but terrible creatures that hunted giants for sport, and foul wizards of terrible power. His elven friends were amused by this, and assured him that there were indeed some humans that have slain giants, but humans were for the most part not particularly evil and mostly harmless, so he decided to pay the city a visit.
At 14th level, he becomes a 2nd level fighter, gaining Action Surge. Once per short rest, he can take an extra action on his turn. This can be an extra attack action, or he could cast a spell and then attack, and many other possibilities. Combined with his Gloomstalker abilities, he could have devastatingly powerful first turn in combat. At 15th level, he becomes a 3rd level fighter, and he chooses his martial archetype. This gets a little tricky. He lacks the intelligence to make a good Eldritch Knight, Psy Warrior, or Arcane Archer, and he lacks the strength or dexterity to be a good Battle Master. Some of the other archetypes would work for him, but he doesn't really suit his character, so you are making a controversial choice and taking Champion. This subclass doesn't get a lot of love because it's very basic and not optimal, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Just not something you would really want to build the character around. But if all you are is going after is the basic fighter chassis, the abilities from Champion are a nice upgrade. Getting a critical hit on a 19 or 20 is really good for a character like this who rolls a lot of dice for damage, and Remarkable Athlete applies to initiative, which combined with the bonus he gets from Gloomstalker will make him very fast in combat. As I mentioned, Champion gives him improved critical, scoring a critical hit on a 19 or 20. At 16th level, he becomes a 4th level fighter, getting an ability score improvement or a feat, and he takes the Crusher feat. It will let him increase his Constitution to 17, and once per turn, when he hits a creature with an attack that deals bludgeoning damage, with which both his sling and club do, he can move the target 5 feet to an unoccupied space as long as the target is no more than one size larger than him. At 17th level, he becomes a 5th level fighter. He already has extra attack, so he doesn't get that much here. The human city was huge, surpassing even the great drow metropolises. He found it both interesting and entertaining. He had a fair bit of gold and was able to live well. He also found that his skills were of great use in the city. It didn't take long for the local authorities to recognize his talents, and when they found he wasn't a thief or murderer, they employed him to help capture thieves and murderers. At first, this was easy enough, but a string of murders happened that he had difficulty solving. The bodies were found cold and gray with expressions of terror on their faces. All of the victims were young men, but there were no other clues or connections between them. He was given the assistance of a priest of the goddess of the dawn and an experienced watch investigator, and they began trying to solve the mystery. His companions were both skilled in stealth and had night vision nearly as acute as his own. They conducted their investigations at night, and everything they found led them to the keep of the local lord. The city's government couldn't officially give them a warrant to search the keep or question the lord, so they took it upon themselves to do it covertly. At 18th level, he becomes a 6th level fighter, getting yet another ability score improvement or a feat, and he takes the resilient feat for Constitution, making his Constitution 18, and giving him proficiency with Constitution saves. This will help with his concentration and the save DC for his Strike of the Giants. At 19th level, he becomes a 7th level fighter. From champion, he gets remarkable athlete, letting him add half his proficiency modifier to any strength, dexterity, or constitution skill or check that doesn't already use his proficiency. This applies to his initiative, which gives him a total of plus 9, so he will frequently be going first in combat, which is exactly what he wants to do. At 20th level, he becomes an 8th level fighter, getting his final ability score improvement or a feat, and he's going to cap his wisdom at 20. Helping his attack and damage, and many of his other save DCs. The keep is eerily abandoned, with no signs of life or even recent habitation are to be seen. The companions make their way into the inner keep that served as the noble family's residence to find it equally abandoned, until they entered some of the private chambers where they found a pile of corpses, gray and cold like the other victims. Some were dressed as guards or servants, but some were clearly members of the Lord's family. They continued higher into the keep until they reached the Lord's chambers, and unlike the rest of the residents, there was a warmth and firelight. Suddenly a maniacal voice sounds out. "Well, intruders, come right in. Thank you for saving me the trouble of seeking out my next meal." The priest called out, "That is Lord Chaucer." But our hero was already moving. He has had his shillelagh ready the whole time they had been in the keep, and he cast his hunter's mark as soon as they saw the thing that used to be the Lord. So he wills himself invisible and rushes in to attack the thing that had confronted them. His blows rained down on it, knocking it backwards toward the fireplace. 5 times he struck it, driving it into the fire. It screamed in pain. The priest came up right behind him, conjuring a shroud of holy spirits that tore at the nobleman, while he also lunged with his longsword. The investigator took a careful aim and fired his short bow, getting a vicious shot against the distracted noble. This should have ended even the strongest of foes, but the thing that was the Lord Chaucer bared its fangs and returned at the attack.
We hope you like this character and our take on Magic Stone. We think the changes we made have made the cantrip useful but not overpowered. Even for this character that is built to use it, it isn't much better than a regular cantrip like Firebolt, and it falls behind Eldritch Blast from a Warlock with the Agonizing Blast invocation. It's also a little less powerful than what a Ranger could do by investing in dexterity and using a bow. That being said, we think it's a very cool character to play with a lot of utility. It works best with a stealthy party, but can work with anyone. It's a good tracker, has a lot of power in both ranged and melee combat, and can work well with allies. However, it would shine in a solo campaign. It doesn't need a lot to function. A stick and some rocks along with his armor is all he needs. Rope Trick and Meld into Stone guarantee him safe rests. Goodberry will keep him healed and fed. In a solo campaign, he might adjust his spell selection to get Cure Wounds and Lesser Restoration, but otherwise he's good. The party we described for the end scenario, which were a Twilight Cleric and an Inquisitive Rogue, would be perfect companions for him. If you enjoyed this character and our adaptation of the Magic Stone cantrip, please tell us about it in the comments, along with any suggestions or build ideas, and join us next time when we continue our exploration of Bigby's Giants. And until then, cheers!